Good evening and welcome. I'm Michael Usher and here's the latest this Wednesday evening. A manhunt is underway as we go to air after this terrifying attack. We're standing by with new information from police at this hour. Breaking news tonight, the top end of town heading for a sleepless night as shareholders stop millions going to bank chiefs. We have developing details on the search for William Tyrrell, active leads and no reason to conclude he's dead. We're live with the very latest on the search for William. The latest sex scandal to rock Canberra, the party boss is here to answer why Andrew Broad still has a job. And the sun is coming up on day 697 of the Trump presidency. We're live to Washington, D.C., where America's Commander-in-Chief has undoubtedly had a restless night. Let's get straight to breaking news from Victoria, where police are hunting for a group of men after an horrific pack attack. Tom Chadwick is live in Melbourne. Tom, good evening to you. What are police saying tonight?
Yeah, good evening to you, Michael. What I can confirm is that indeed Victorian police are still on the lookout for these 8 men, these 8 cowardly men who set upon this one man on Sunday in Roxburgh Park. As you can see by our mobile phone vision there, who was actually taken by the victim's partner, it is some horrific vision indeed. This man, I believe, was acting as a good Samaritan. I'm told by the local residents there in Roxburgh Park that they are fed up with local hoons. Essentially, they are trail bike riders who keep going up and down their street at random times of the day, and this man was simply coming to the aid of local residents there, and as you can see, things certainly go awry on Sunday.
So we can see them on the bikes there, but any other word,
vision, Michael?
Yeah, any other word on exactly who they're looking for there? We can see them on the trail bikes. Any other description of them?
Yeah, Michael, I'm told by Victorian police, I just spoke to them a moment ago, they are looking for men roughly in the ages of their late teens or early 20s. They are described of Middle Eastern appearance, and as you can see on the mobile phone vision there, that once things get a little bit hairy on the street, they actually take off in a grey, silver or a silver Astra. So anyone in the local area, particularly in the Roxburgh Park area, I'm told that they are trail bike riders, that police are telling me and telling locals there that if they do recognise these men, to indeed call Crime Stoppers.
OK, good evening, Tom Chadwick in Melbourne. Thank you for that. The National Australia Bank is in crisis tonight over the largest ever protest vote in Australian corporate history against the remuneration of management at a blue chip company. 88% of shareholders voted against the NAB remuneration report at today's AGM in Melbourne, following the executive team receiving bonuses despite a horror year, including multiple allegations of misconduct during the Banking Royal Commission, of course. NAB Chairman Ken Henry admitted the bank has made mistakes and the pay structure is being scrapped following an outpouring of anger from outraged shareholders. Just have a look at this.
I'm a victim of the NAB and I want the shareholders to listen to these catastrophic happenings.
You have destroyed billions and billions of dollars of value.
I don't think that a man that earns $1,000 an hour needs a bonus.
I shudder every time, just about every time I pick up the paper or look at my phone to see what the latest price is.
We got it wrong. We know we got it wrong. We have to fix it. And we're going to spend next year fixing it, OK? We're not telling people to get nicked. We want to talk to them and find out how we can get it right next year. Be under no illusions, though. This is going to be hard. It's going to be really hard for us. It's going to be hard for our shareholders because actually...
That's putting it mildly. So for the very latest on this, we're joined by Network Finance Editor Gemma Acton in the studio this evening. Gemma, just how significant was that vote that we saw there?
Oh, Michael, it was very significant. 88% is a tremendous protest vote, whichever way you look at it. And the very clear message being sent by shareholders is it's not okay to pay bonuses in a year where performance by the bank has been dismal, whichever way you look at it. You know, the share price is off by 20%, profits are down. The Royal Commission unveiled a raft of scandals, whether that be customer fraud or broken internal risk systems or cultures. And to see the CEO walk away with around $4.4 million was clearly unacceptable to shareholders. And then to hear from the chairman, yes, but it could have been $10 million if things had gone well, was very cold comfort, clearly.
Have we seen anything like this in Australian corporate history, culture in Australia?
Well, this has been a very interesting year for shareholder meetings, and if we just look at the banks, this is clearly not a problem confined to the NAB. Just a week ago, Westpac had around 2/3 of their shareholders vote against their pay plan. Today, ANZ had about a 1/3 rejection rate. So the fundamental question of how should bank executives be paid is something that has a long way to go in terms of being resolved between shareholders.
Just explain that briefly on the screen, though. Why is the CommBank only 6%?
Well, the CommBank decided not to pay short-term bonuses this year.
So they got ahead of the curve on that one?
That's right,
yeah.
and they actually went first, so others could have learnt the lesson, which they clearly didn't. So the NAB tried to tweak the way it paid its bonuses, but the fact of the matter was, you heard repeatedly today shareholders asking for 0 bonuses to be paid this year.
So there'll be a few NAB executives feeling pretty bruised tonight, to put it mildly.
It was a pretty brutal meeting, 3.5 hours long as well.
Let's check off some other things that have been happening during the day, because it's been a busy day in finance. Quite incredible day for the financial sector, in fact. Major announcement from the regulator APRA. What was that?
Right, so about a year and a half ago, the prudential regulator APRA brought in several measures to try and cool down the growth in housing. And one of those was saying that of new loans, only 30% can be interest only. And today they pulled that back. And clearly what they're trying to do is stimulate credit growth again. And we can see that interest-only loans have fallen off a lot in recent years. If you go back around 3.5 years, about half of all loans, new loans issued, were interest-only. Today it's around 16%. But the big question is, will this really help re-stimulate demand? Because banks are a lot more cautious these days, much more reluctant to lend. Consumers, seeing house prices falling, seeing cost of living pressures higher than ever, are really reluctant to take on too much more debt. They've already got 200% household debt to income. So it's very unclear whether this will actually help re-stimulate
Just
growth.
briefly, whilst I have you, because a lot of people watching this tonight are watching their superannuation and what it's doing at the moment. Your face says it all exactly. Many funds are looking at their first negative results since about 2011, right?
That's right. So look, it's been a difficult year for many investments. And if you think about the average Australian who has their money in super, about 2/3 of them have them in a balanced fund with the major funds. Now, until the end of November, the median balanced fund was up 1.8%, but that's very mildly up. December's been a tough month, particularly for Australian equities, where there is quite a lot of weighting in a balanced fund. So it's entirely possible that they finish the year slightly in negative territory.
So a lot of calls to their advisors going, what is going on? But that's part of the ride.
I think so.
Indeed. All right, Gemma, thanks so much for coming to the studio. Appreciate it. Well, his disappearance more than 4 years ago captivated the country, and tonight there is still hope that William Tyrrell could be alive. Earlier, New South Wales Police revealed they're investigating active leads in the case ahead of a coronial inquest, which will begin next year. Let's bring in 7 News reporter Alex Hart now to just have a talk about this. Alex, police have looked at, we learned today, over 15,000 pieces of information. They've investigated over 600 persons of interest. Why do they think he could still be alive, young William?
Well, good evening, Michael. For the simple reason that there is really not enough evidence to prove that William Tyrrell is dead, there is always going to be some hope that he will be found alive. And as long as that remains the case, it gives his loved ones, in particular his foster parents, something to cling on to, no matter how painful that is. There are a lot of legal restrictions surrounding this case and sensitivities that prevent us identifying them and talking about a lot of the details of this case. But suffice to say, they've been through absolute hell over the past 4 years and 3 months since little William's disappearance from Kendall up on the mid-north coast of New South Wales back in September 2014. It's hard to believe they're coming up now on their 5th Christmas without their little boy. It's a time of such joy for so many of us, but for them, of course, marked by incredible sadness. We know they've continued to buy presents for William over the years in the hope that he will one day return home to open them. And today really marked the beginning of a new chapter in this painful story, mapping out how this inquest is going to play out over the next 12 months or so. The first round of hearings in March, more hearings in August. We learned from police that they are still investigating active leads in relation to this case. The officer in charge, Gary Jubilant, wouldn't elaborate on what they were. There certainly wasn't any imminent suggestion that there will be a breakthrough, if you like, but the coroner made clear that ultimately they'd be seeking to determine whether or not William is found dead or alive. And even if they do that, Michael, there's no guarantee. The other big question will be answered, and that is, where is William? Well,
and also, who's likely to appear? I mean, who's the inquest going to hear from? The inquest has a lot of power. It can call a lot of witnesses.
It does, yeah. The final list of witnesses is still being put together. A couple of names we did learn today may be familiar to people who have been following this case. Paul Savage, he's the neighbour that lives opposite William's grandmother's house in Kenda, where William disappeared from. He was involved in the search on that initial morning when he disappeared. The other name is perhaps more notable, William Spedding, better known as Bill. He's the refrigerator repairman who was previously named by police as a person of interest in this case, but he's never been charged and he's always denied any involvement whatsoever. We don't know exactly when the findings will be handed down of this inquest, Michael, but certainly this case will once again create plenty of headlines in 2019.
It will, and your heart breaks for the family, doesn't it, Alex? So close to Christmas particularly. All right, thank you for that. The latest and other stories around the nation now. A major storm has swept through Sydney this evening. A total 7,000 lightning strikes hit the city in the space of 2 hours. There are reports of significant hail damage and trees down. You can see the vision there. That's still coming into our newsroom tonight. It is also understood a plane was struck by lightning as it came into land at Sydney Airport. Just a couple of hours ago, there was a reversal from Brisbane's men-only Tattersalls Club. It voted to allow women to become full members. The first time in the club's 150-year history. That has been a controversial issue there, and for the record, the vote was close. 1,405 members voting in favour of the change, 1,368 voting against it. And the NRL's had a nightmare year with scandal after scandal, and now 2 rugby league teams are in turmoil tonight. The Cronulla Sharks are appealing an $800,000 fine issued over dealings with controversial coach Shane Flanagan. And meanwhile, in a separate investigation, West Tigers CEO Justin Pascoe has been deregistered for his role in a salary cap scandal involving Robbie Farah. Now to the scandal that simply won't go away this evening and has sent the National Party into a level of crisis mode and left many of their MPs still in hiding. Ever since New Idea broke the story that married Victoria MP Andrew Broad was using dating apps to meet younger women whilst travelling, many of you at home have been asking, and rightly so, is there a cultural problem within the National Party? So to talk about this and address it, we are joined by Larry Anthony, the President of the National Party, who joins me in the studio this evening. Larry, thanks for coming in. It's a fair question. Does the National Party have a cultural problem?
Well, I don't believe we do have a cultural problem. There's no doubt that the issue that happened just recently is totally unacceptable. But in 2 years' time, Michael, we'll be celebrating 100 years. So we're a very old political party. There's been many fine members gone before us. There are many fine members now. But the activity that happened this week is just unacceptable. And the good thing is, if there's any good thing to come out of this, is that he did step down and he's actually leaving the parliament. And that's a major commitment made by him.
You start the year on a sex scandal with Barnaby Joyce. You end the year on one with Andrew Broad. So I ask you again, somewhere in the party there has to be a cultural problem about what your members are up to.
Well, there's no question this hasn't been the finest year from the beginning, but we have 22 members in the Federal National Party. You've referred to 2 members. I think it's a big aspersion to cast it on everyone else. They are very capable men and women. Clearly Barnaby Joyce paid a big price, and this chap has even paid a bigger price.
You won't mention him by name?
Oh, Andrew Broad, absolutely I'll mention him by name. I mean, I think it's a tragedy. He failed a critical test. And that critical test...
Well, he failed the cultural test, the value test, the human test. And I guess values is a good question to ask him. I mean, what does the National Party stand for in terms of its values if a gentleman like Andrew Broad can represent you?
Well, I think you're putting an aspersion that it's just one individual. The fact is we've got very good members and they're working very hard in their local communities right across Australia. We've got some very good women. Now, admittedly, we haven't got enough women, but I'm hoping... 2 women? Well, we had 3. We had Fiona Nash, she was very good, and we're not the same size as the Labor Party. We're not the same size as the Liberal Party.
Bridget McKenzie, would you endorse her getting out of the Senate and taking that seat?
Well, Bridget's a
well-respected deputy of yours?
She is. She's she is a deputy, and she's doing a fantastic job. But ultimately, that's a decision for Bridget. I think she's done a fantastic job.
As the President of the party? Well, I mean, you must surely see that she would be a good shining light and in that seat.
She is a good shining light. She's our deputy now. She's a very capable minister, but this is a decision for her to make, to move down from the Senate to the House of Representatives. Of course, I would...
Would you endorse her for that job?
I would welcome her getting the lower house. But I also know that in our party it's very democratic, and it's actually... I don't have a vote in this. It's actually the men and women of Mallee in the National Party there that will decide who the next candidate is.
One final thing, if you don't mind, Larry. Michael McCormick, it's not been his best week either in the way he's handled it, the statements he made to the media, then having to correct them, some confusion over the timeline of when he knew about Andrew Broad's activities, some 5 weeks it turned out in fact, and particularly not telling the Prime Minister until really the story broke. Why? And have you had a few stern words with him?
Well, I discuss many things with my leader,
but specifically on those issues.
And he discusses it with me. Well, we have in recent times, of course. But I will.
Are you happy with his performance of the past week?
I will point this out because I think it's unfair. I mean, there's obviously some allegations that were made or brought to his attention a few weeks ago or a bit longer, and it was kind of unknown, right? Then in the story, it appeared this Monday in New Idea, and within hours, Michael had asked for his resignation. He stepped down from the front bench, and then within 24 hours, he's actually made a decision not to recontest.
Sure, but he knew about it for 5 weeks, and he knew that behaviour was happening. Why didn't he take action then and there?
If you compare this to what's happened in the Greens recently, what's happened with Labor, the member for Lindsay, what's happened with the former opposition leader, the New South Wales Labor Party, they were dragged on for a very long time. So, yes, things could have been done quicker, but I think they were expedited very quickly when it was finally confirmed.
All right, Larry, thanks for coming in.
Good to be on your show.
And still to come, could marijuana be legalised in Victoria within 2 years? The woman who's determined to make that happen will join me live. Plus, we'll go to Washington, D.C. The sun is coming up, the birds are tweeting, and so is the President, Mr Trump, as his charity is labelled a piggy bank, and his former senior staffer is essentially accused of treason. And farewell to a Hollywood great. Tributes continue to pour in tonight for Hollywood star Penny Marshall. All that when we come back on this busy Wednesday evening. Welcome back to a developing story out of Victoria now, where a new fight is kicking off this evening to legalise marijuana. The woman leading the charge tonight is State Independent MP Fiona Patten, and she's certainly someone who has developed a reputation for getting things done, and Fiona joins me live from Melbourne now. Fiona, good evening. Number one, do you believe you're going to make this happen? But why? Why do you want to legalise marijuana? What's the driving force?
Look, I think there's a number of issues, but one is, at the moment, what we're doing now doesn't work. It doesn't stop people using cannabis, but what it does do is it lines the coffers and lines the pockets of criminals. So what I would like to do is get cannabis out of the hands of criminals and out of the hands of young people and children in particular. And we've seen this successfully happen in numerous jurisdictions overseas, and most recently Canada.
Is the risk worth the reward, though, Fiona?
Look, we know that prohibition has never stopped anyone from using cannabis. We know that in Victoria alone, the police report that the cannabis industry is worth over $1.1 billion. So whatever we're doing now is not working. And I think it's now to look at the evidence and look at what other jurisdictions are doing successfully, which is legalising, regulating, controlling the market so that we can provide education, we can tax it, we can ensure that it's only adults who have access to this substance. And what we've seen in other jurisdictions is not only that, but it brings in hundreds of millions of dollars out of the criminals' hands and into the government's hands, where we can provide education.
Yeah, but Fiona, you're endorsing drugs. You're saying that drugs are okay. You're saying that drugs are fine. And if you read some of this, I did a quick print off this evening before we got on air, the Positive Choices website, which is a fact sheet for teachers in schools. Now, it certainly says that, 1 in 7 students between the ages of 12 and 17 are using cannabis. But look at the side effects: anxiety and panic attacks, paranoia, psychosis. If you have mental health issues, and that's such an extraordinary issue now, do not go near marijuana. By advocating it, by making it legal, aren't you saying it's okay to take the drugs?
I think what I'm trying to say is these people are already using the drug, and we need to provide a way to educate them. We need to provide a way to control it. At the moment, we're not controlling it. Kids can get access to cannabis almost more easily than they can to cigarettes. So you don't find a drug dealer asking for someone's photo ID. So what we're doing now is not protecting our children. And as you say, 1 in 7 kids is already using cannabis. Now, that's because they can buy it illicitly. What we see in other jurisdictions is when you control it, then you can start controlling who has access to it. And we see reductions in cannabis use, particularly amongst young people. But I think most importantly, we can provide that education, as we do with tobacco, as we do with alcohol. We provide education and we look at providing harm minimisation.
Very briefly, Fiona, do you think you can get it done?
Is not working.
Do you think you can get it done? Can you make marijuana legal in Victoria?
Well, look, a lot of people said I couldn't get a lot of things done, and I've managed to do it. So I am hopeful that in the next 2 years, yeah, we can get it done.
All right. Well, whether taxpayers accept money out of marijuana revenue, I don't know, but we'll wait and see. Fiona Patton, thanks for joining us this evening.
Thanks, Michael.
Okay. Well, it is nearly 7 a.m. Wednesday, Washington, D.C., and I'm guessing President Trump has had better mornings. Once again, Americans are trying to make sense of a dizzying day of political drama. The president's former national security advisor, Michael Flynn, went to court happy, expecting a slap on the wrist and no jail time. He left not so happy after being verbally slapped and still facing possible jail time. On the list of Michael Flynn's misdeeds, lying to the FBI about conversations with the Russian ambassador. That lie has become part of Robert Mueller's ongoing investigation into whether the Trump campaign colluded with Russia to win the 2016 election. And for those of you keeping tally, have a look at this. Here's a list of people already indicted, convicted or investigated in relation to the 2016 presidential campaign. So along with Michael Flynn, we have George Papadopoulos, Trump's former advisor, Michael Cohen, Trump's former lawyer and fixer, Paul Manafort, Trump's former campaign chairman, Rick Gates, Trump's former deputy campaign chairman, Alex van der Zwaan, a lawyer who once worked closely with Manafort and with Gates, Richard Pineo, the California man who was found to have sold bank accounts, 12 Russian intelligence officers, 13 Russians and 3 Russian entities. To guide us through all of that, let's bring in Washington correspondent Simon Marks. Now, Simon, good evening to you from here. Can Donald Trump avoid being added to that list that we just saw?
There's every possibility that when Donald Trump leaves the White House, Michael, he will face criminal investigation because if someone like Michael Cohen, for example, is going to jail for 3 years over the payoffs that he made to women at the instigation of President Donald Trump, then there is every possibility that President Trump himself will face prosecution with regard just to that issue. Then on top of that, the grinding inquiry by Robert Mueller, the special prosecutor, into ties between the Trump campaign and the Russians. And yesterday in court, Michael Flynn, and just 24 hours ago on Twitter, Donald Trump expressed support for Michael Flynn. He said nothing here about it so far this morning. The cat appears to have got his tongue, but the judge really seemed ready to throw the book at Michael Flynn in that court appearance yesterday, saying he could barely hide his disgust with what Michael Flynn had done. As a result, General Flynn, the former national security advisor, huddled with his lawyers and then requested a delay in sentencing for 90 days because they and Michael Flynn could see that the judge was preparing to send him to jail.
What sort of Christmas is it going to be for Donald Trump, not knowing that Flynn won't be back in court until early in the new year now?
Look, very, very difficult Christmas for Donald Trump and a very, very difficult new year on the horizon. And that's because starting in January, Democrats in the House of Representatives take control. They will have investigative powers. They'll have the power to subpoena, to force testimony from people within President Donald Trump's inner circle. And there are lingering questions that the Trump White House still has not answered, specifically about Michael Flynn. Why did President Trump keep him on for 2.5 weeks as national security advisor after the president and his top lawyers inside the White House were warned by the Justice Department that Michael Flynn was a blackmail risk? That is a question that isn't going to go away. Investigators continue to ask it. They get no answer.
Well, it's early morning there. Stand by for a potential barrage of Trump tweets. Simon in DC, thank you so much for that. Well, on top of the Michael Flynn drama, the president's charity, the Trump Foundation, has been shut down following accusations he and 3 of his children were effectively using it as their personal piggy banks. And do you recognise this tune? It is, of course, a theme song for Laverne and Shirley, catchy one. And sadly, one half of that duo has passed away. Penny Marshall died on Monday from complications due to diabetes at the age of 75. Laverne. Marshall first gained fame as a factory worker. Laverne DeFazio on the beloved 1970s sitcom went on to direct blockbuster hits such as Big and A League of Their Own, paving the way for a new wave of female directors. That's the front page there of today's New York Post. Penny Marshall telling her sister just before she passed, as you can see there, quote, "I had a great life." Good way to look at it. Still to come, the latest from your views on tonight's news, weather, finance, and our final frame, the still image of the day and the incredible story behind it. All that when we come back on this Wednesday night.
Be inspired by one of the most beautiful...
Welcome back. You're looking at a live shot from New York City. It is a chilly -3 degrees in Times Square right now as they wake up for their Wednesday morning. Taking a look at the forecast around the country, it'll be a mixed bag of sunshine and showers with temperatures reaching the upper 20s and lower 30s in most cities. In other regional areas, or near the larger cities rather, Mandurah will enjoy the sun, but skies will be mostly cloudy, risk of showers, thunderstorms in other places. Let's take a quick look at the markets around the world and make sense of what it will mean for us tomorrow morning. In London, Wednesday morning has started in the green and the early trends out of New York show slight gains for the Nasdaq and the Dow. At home, the ASX 200 closed down 8.9 points. Australian dollar sitting at 72 cents and 56 British pence. Now, here are the stories we're tracking overnight as we head to sunrise at 5:30 in the morning. Wild weather has just slammed Sydney again. We're tracking the damage and the clean-up this evening. National Party President Larry Anthony has just told me here that he doesn't believe his party has a values or culture problem. Shareholders have vented at an historic NAB AGM. The impact of today will be felt for months to come in corporate Australia. Now, the latest from you on tonight's stories. Of course, Hollywood is remembering the late, great Penny Marshall, including fellow director and actor Rob Marshall, who lived with the actress and director for a time. He spoke about her funny bone and how much he's going to miss her. Tom Hanks, who starred in Big, which was directed by Penny, also tweeted speaking about how much they laughed together and saying, "Wish we still could. Love ya, Hanks." Before we go this evening, our final frame. It's an image that really captures the sentiment of the day's events or an issue. And tonight that comes from the great shareholder revolution at NAB's prickly, unprecedented annual general meeting. Investors in the bank, they're as mad as hell and they're not going to take it anymore. We heard their words earlier, but here are the faces that the bank cannot ignore anymore. And in particular, as we get to our final frame, it's Chris Schott, there he is, who made sure that a few NAB executives poured a stiff drink tonight, calling them, quote, unacceptable face of capitalism, and that again, quote, they'd created a system of unconscionable greed and it's got to end. Chris Schott, who shot down the bankers' bonuses, is our final frame tonight. Well, thank you for your company this evening. From 7 News, that's the latest. I'm Michael Usher. Have a good night.